After a long while, hello and welcome back to the Tiberium Armory series. This is part 2 of the Evolution and Defenses, where I go over the Brotherhood of Nod defensive structures over the years. In general, a lot of what applied in the GDI video, with old technology being used for most of the First War and part of the Second War, is still in effect here. But otherwise, let's just jump right in. If one was to look just based off of the game, it would look as though the Brotherhood of Nod did not have very many base defense structures at all. While it is in reality true that they used a lot of the same structures as the GDI, as they had available a lot of the same technology. So we're probably talking guard towers, minefields, stuff like that. That was probably used throughout the Second and Third Wars also. Just going off of what we have from the games, however, the first Nod defense was the turret, a simple 105mm gun used to counter GDI's decided armor advantage. These short-range cannons were usually meant to defend static positions from waves of tanks or the unexpected positions from individual task forces. It is to be noted, however, that with the 105mm armor-piercing cannon on a concrete pedestal, it was not very well armored in that it could and was, several times during the war, at least that we see on screen, destroyed with short-range missiles. This thing was not meant to have a very heavy defensive footprint. Rather, it was meant to help slow down and soften up troops as they get into the real defenses. The turrets are fairly slapdash, although they are automated, or at least remotely controlled. They feature only steel hulls, which made them very vulnerable. The manual from 1995 mentions that they are firepower-wise equivalent of a medium tank's cannon without the mobility. It is mentioned on the wiki that it has a 105mm AP cannon, but it is worth noting that in 2019, when this battle really starts, the medium tanks would be using 120mm cannons. So, just like most things in the Nod arsenal, it was underpowered compared to what it would be fighting. Moving on to something that was not in any way underpowered compared to what it was fighting, was the surface-to-air missile sites, or SAM sites, that we see in Tiberium Dawn and in Renegade. These were a enormous pain in the ass for GDI, who had the air advantage usually in most encounters. These things were capable of recessing into the ground to better avoid detection and stand ion cannon strikes or artillery shelling. These things were so effective that often, before even beginning to approach a base, GDI was forced to use ground troops far in advance before they could get any sort of aerial support in an area. For this reason, Nod usually guarded these SAM sites with considerable troop presences. These missile launchers could fire both short and long-range missiles, depending on whether or not the Brotherhood had access to satisfactory GPS at the time. Of course, GDI controlling space. This may not sound like a problem, but in more recent times, with the war in Ukraine, a lot of Russian equipment, supposedly, stopped working when they went to use them because they were built off of the GPS grid produced by the Americans, which switched it off before combat. So if we're looking at former Soviet and Eastern Bloc states, we might have to consider a Brotherhood of Nod without GPS access, at least without clandestine GPS access. The ultimate structure of the Nod base, rare to see, as these bases were often very well hidden on top of being very well defended, was the Obelisk of Light. The first version was described by an anonymous GDI soldier as a tall, ominous tower of doom. It does wonders for morale. The Obelisk is a effort of the laser program, light amplified stimulated emission of radiation, where it creates a coherent beam of light radiation, which, provided enough power, can obliterate tanks or infantry with ease. These things, while slow to fire, were pinpoint accurate, and although in war it does not seem they are able to fight aircraft, it does not make very much sense that they would not be able to. Unless this is only for fast-moving aircraft, such as jets, or high-flying aircraft, such as B-2 Spirit bombers. In-game and in Renegade, the laser it fires is a very bright red, although it is not completely certain if this laser would even be visible to the naked eye. So it could be that as people are walking across this area, trying to approach a base, they get zapped by the Obelisk of Light and have no clue where it comes from, because it is so well hidden in the area. This reminds me of the first mission in the Renegade game, where the entire base is situated in a canyon. Very difficult to spot, where the laser could hit from nearly any direction before you're ready. This sort of technology was also developed into infantry-capable weapons, codenamed Firefly and Tarantula, although these things were not updated, at least as far as we know, through the next couple wars. As for the firepower of these obelisks, the first generation obelisk could destroy a medium tank, which is an Abrams tank, in 1 to 2 hits. Now, these tanks are knocked out only with the very, very powerful and advanced technology munitions of today, with features such as where it would be fired and then track to the target and then hit from the top to emphasize the weak point from the top of the structure. Now, this cannon can fire and pierce all the way through and ignite the gas tank in these tanks in a single shot. Now, that is exceptionally powerful, far beyond what we have access to today, although there was a very interesting development in military technology a couple of years ago, where a laser was able to destroy a engine block in an armored truck from a mile away, which is very interesting. We might be getting close to the Obelisk of Light after all. Moving on to the Second Tiberium War, we have the laser turret, the Tiberian Sun version of their combined anti-infantry and anti-armor weapon. Similar to the Obelisk of Light, it uses a focused laser beam to defeat enemy units. This thing was relatively slow firing, but much faster than its turret predecessor. This thing was capable of damaging light vehicles, infantry, and even mammoth tanks with repeated and group firings. They were relatively low to the ground and small, meant to be recessed into the ground to help prevent destruction from long-range fire and artillery. Moving on to the next one, we have the SAM sight. Pretty much exactly the same as the first Tiberium War version, but in this case it does not recess into the ground. It fires something called red-eye SAM missiles, which I think is a proprietary Nod SAM missile, and is capable of being fired at long and short ranges. Next is the second generation Obelisk of Light, with a new shape, but with the same kick-ass, anti-armor, anti-everything, really, ability. One of the things that this version of the Obelisk did better than the first version was that it was much more armored, much more resilient to attack. It is notable that Cabal, during the Firestorm Crisis, created the Obelisk of Darkness, and the Cabal Obelisk to defend its core. The Obelisk was able to defend more powerfully than the standard Obelisk, and the Obelisk of Darkness was able to vaporize aircraft, even coming in at exceptionally high speeds. Thankfully, these were all destroyed by the end of the crisis. Even more important than the Obelisk of Light, however, to the base defense of the Brotherhood of Nod in this era, though, was the stealth generator. It was a massive structure that made use of Nod's advanced active cloaking technology to cloak entire sections of the base from visual identification. It is notable, however, that if you knew what to see, you would still be able to see infrared signatures, flickers in the air that might give away this cloaked area. Moving on to the Third Tiberium War, and the last game is the Shredder Turret, Nod's basic counter-infantry turret in the Tiberium Wars game. These turrets, along with the SAM sights and the laser turrets, come prepackaged in a new command and control system called the Turret Hub. This hub contains sensors similar to those in mobile sensors arrays, and if the turrets are damaged, the hub can contain them, recess them into the pieces, and then repair them, making Nod defenses, if not constantly and thoroughly destroyed, a very dangerous, persistent threat. The first of these structures is the Shredder Turret, which is a very large, high-powered shrapnel gun. Essentially, the thing is a 12-barreled shotgun, powerful enough to defeat any body armor on any infantry, and even small, lightly armored vehicles. They are incredibly devastating, and can recess into the ground, making them much harder to destroy and spot, though they are usually given away by the turret hub system, which will be some distance away. Next is the laser turret, which is the anti-vehicle emplacement for the Tiberium Wars game. These pair of lasers are hidden underground and are able to be deployed at a moment's notice to defeat light armored to heavy armored vehicles with relative ease. Individually, each one of these laser turrets are less durable and do less damage than a GDI Guardian cannon or a Skrin photon cannon, which isn't very surprising, but these turrets come in very large numbers. One of the favorite tactics, actually, with these sorts of things is to place them behind walls, where you can have the turrets on one side and the hub, which is more vulnerable, on the other side. So as you approach, huge numbers of these turrets pop up, fire, and then pop down to avoid being shot at. Note that this particular building is also affected by the Spitfire laser capacitors, which allow it to do substantially more damage in its anti-armor role. Next is the SAM sight, which this SAM sight is special because it is very specially designed to look kick-ass, as well as being a part of the new turret hub system. These things are designed to fire volleys of missiles at individual targets in the air, can come equipped with the Tiberium core missiles upgrade, which greatly expands the lethality of these turrets. One of the great things about these is that if you have an outpost somewhere and you have it along an area that aircraft might fly within a mile or so, you can have these things shielded against view by stealth generators, and in an out-of-the-way area, you can have them periodically pop up, fire missiles away, and then pop down before anyone could notice where these shots are coming from. Next up is the Disruption, which is the new and improved, cheaper version of the stealth generator. This thing, while lacking the ability to cloak itself, is very helpful at cloaking large sections of bases around an area from view. Although by this period, most light vehicles that GDI had were equipped with sensor equipment that were able to see through this. So this was often used in conjunction with other base defenses to make every base approach an ambush. Finally, we have the ISIS Obelisk of Light defensive structure that is the heaviest and most powerful version ever built. It is capable of destroying a Mammoth Mk3 tank in 3 shots. With considering how powerful these tanks are, that means these obelisks must indeed be much more powerful. And they can, in the games, take out a Predator tank in a single hit, which is pretty great. They had another upgrade that was available where a beam cannon could charge an obelisk to give it additional firepower, fire rate boost, and a range boost, although these things were capable at firing at ranges of a mile. So all the range boost did was increase the lethality across the range of the laser. This version also came with 2 different modes of attack. One where the tower will charge and then fire a strong beam to deal with a single enemy unit, or it will not charge at all and briefly fire a sustained beam that can sweep entire squads of infantry, killing multiple soldiers at once. As a small bonus, there is also the Ion Disruptor Field Generator, which was a very, very powerful defense, very expensive, only applied at the most critical areas that could prevent an entire area from being hit by GDI's ion cannons, which basically prevents WMDs from being used in any part of the area, considering that GDI does not use nuclear weapons. Now that we're all done, I hope everybody has had a good chance to learn a little bit more about the defensive structures in the Tiberium Wars. Now that we've gone through the GDI and Nod, I might do one on the screen, although that's going to be a shorter video, so I don't know yet. Well, I hope everyone has had a great time, and I'll see you next time.